Welcome back to episode 89 of the only weekly entomology podcast hosted by a master in entomology. Today is a listener request from a fellow Japanese resident, Rachel, wanting to share one of her favorite arthropods, the wharf roach, aka funamushi, which translates to boat bug, even though it's technically not a bug at all, or even an insect. But before we hit the deck with wharf roaches, are you the kind of person who loves learning about animals? Possibly sharks? I recently started listening to a podcast called Deep Dives with Sharks, hosted by Alex. He dives into a different shark species every week, covering lots of fun facts, news, and safety tips. The content isn't super long, just like mine, and it's highly educational. Y'all should go check it out. And if you hit up the Deep Dives with Sharks podcast content, be sure to let him know that Insects for Fun sent you. Alright, we're going to move away from the shark talk now into shallower territory, where we'll find our arthropod of the week. Wharf roaches are crustaceans in the order Isopoda, which means isopods. The family is called Ligiidae, and the genus for sea slaters or wharf roaches is Ligia, which comes from a Greek name for a siren who lived ashore of what is now modern Calabria in southern Italy. There are about 54 species, but the one we're focused on today is Ligia exotica. This is probably the most common and most distributed wharf roach, which means it has the most information made publicly available. These wharf roaches can grow up to 4 centimeters or a little over 1.5 inches. That's pretty large for an isopod, and part of why they're called roaches, aside from how they scuttle around. They love hanging out on wave breakers, rocky walls by the ocean, and harbor walls. They're often seen in groups too. Now, something they don't love is being underwater, despite needing to live incredibly close. The reason they need to live so close is because they primarily feed on algae and diatoms along with other sea debris. They also use the seawater to collect moisture, but we'll get into that later. Also, diatoms again are the annoying brown flaky algae that sometimes cover plants and decorations in your fish tanks. So far, these isopods probably aren't sounding like they'd be pretty, but the truth is Ligia exotica can have beautiful galaxy-esque coloring with bright orange edges. The ones I find in Japan often have different hues and shades of blue, with white glittery speckles surrounded by a bright orange ridge. I seriously can't help but stare starry-eyed at some of the larger ones when I see them while fishing on piers or chilling at the beach. Not all of them are this beautiful, and the description given on Wikipedia says they're actually dark gray with brown flecks. Now, I've never seen one with brown flecks, but then again, I've only seen the ones in Totori, so who knows. Ligia exotica have 14 legs, which you can see because they protrude out from under their bodies. They also have 2 large compound eyes and 2 antennae that are bent like the antennae seen on your typical woodlice. The other thing they have in common with woodlice is that they're on the wide and flat side, unlike roly-polies. The distribution for this species is the Mediterranean, Hawaii, the eastern half of the United States, and of course Japan and other parts of Asia. It was first found and described in France, but its native range is the Indo-Pacific, which is exactly why the species name given was exotica. Thankfully, even though it's widely distributed thanks to ports, it's not a threat to local wildlife. The population densities can get pretty high though, and reproduction starts when females are merely 16 millimeters in length, which is less than half their largest size. Depending on the size, females can hold up to 140 embryos. A really cool feature to these is that their eggs actually develop in a brood pouch, so it gives the illusion that these isopods have live birth. The time it takes for eggs to grow and develop to a stage of release is about 5 weeks, and the adults can stay alive up to 2.5 years. These animals need to be near water but can't actually live submerged despite having gills. Their gills are soft and membranous like other isopods and are hidden on their undersides, specifically the last 5 body segments. The longest they can last under the surface of water is a few hours, and they don't voluntarily run into the water either. It was actually found that they have hollow sections in their legs which they use to uptake moisture, so if they get too dry, they just need to stand near a wet surface to rehydrate. These legs also have ways of controlling the salt intake, which is why they can survive off salty water. Some of these wharf roaches have even been documented to absorb water through their uropods, which are the two tail-looking appendages that extend from their last body segment. An example of this I found was in the species Ligia bodiniana, which lives from the very southern coast of the United States down to the northern coasts of South America. These animals are not dangerous to people and aren't poisonous either. In fact, they've been studied as a food source and used as supplemental fish food. The nutritional value for these is not so high. It's not that they don't have any value, because that's not true, but compared to shrimp or fish meal, their nutrition numbers don't quite match. They're often prey for birds and fish though that live near the shorelines, but they're hardly eaten by other arthropods. Perhaps they're too salty, and this is another reason why they've adapted to live next to the ocean. And that's going to be it for today's episode. I know it was a shorter one, but there isn't much out there on these little critters. But maybe that'll change in the future. Now, before you go anywhere, please make sure to rate this podcast and write a review. It helps so much, and it doesn't cost a dime. Only a short amount of your time. Of course, there is also the Patreon. If you don't like ads, then you should definitely go check out that, because you can get ad-free episodes. But it gets better. There's also monthly bonus episodes and even vlogs of my nature adventures and insect pets. Links to everything are in the show notes, and thank you as always for listening.